I have a question. What would you do for God if you weren't afraid and you had absolutely everything you needed to accomplish that dream? What would you do? Maybe it's something small, or maybe it's seemingly impossible. Now, just imagine if every one of us actually did the dream that was in our hearts. I promise you, the world would shift. It would shift. Not just our neighborhoods, not just our churches, not just our cities. I believe it would shift an entire generation. Try to tell me I'm wrong. Make a case against it. If all of us obeyed God, if all of us did the things that He put in us to do for His glory and for others' good, tell me that eternity would not shift. See, God has put passions in your hearts. He's put needs in front of you that you see. And you have unique gifts and unique stories, and every one of you has suffered unique things. And so often, those very things are the soil in which God brings up our passions, and we're ignoring it. My friend Tasha Morrison, a year ago, came over, and we laid out all the parts of her life. She was restless, and we knew that God was birthing something new in her, but she didn't know what. And so we sat on the floor of my living room, and we had all these papers spread out everywhere. And the papers actually contained things like her life story and her passions and her burdens and her gifts. And as we prayed over them and talked through them, it was so clear that God was stirring and leading her to do something really brave. Tasha and I had been a part of a racial reconciliation group together, and this was before Ferguson and the other moments of racial tension that we have seen in our country in a public way. We'd seen God move mightily, and Tasha, as a strong African-American woman, had somewhat naturally begun to speak about racial reconciliation as everybody is thinking about it and wanting to lean in and wanting to understand and wanting to help. And through our group, deep friendships were born and walls fell down and understanding flowed from these really difficult conversations that our friends of color were brave enough to have with us. I said out loud what was ridiculously obvious. Tasha, you need to start a racial reconciliation ministry. It's no secret that we're in the midst of difficult to navigate racial tension right now, and the world needs what we've experienced in our group. I remember she looked down and she shook her head. She said, Jenny, I can't do that. Who am I to do that? This is a hard road, and I just don't know. The look that she had in her eyes that day, it was pretty familiar, actually, because just a few years earlier, I had been clear on the obedient steps that God wanted me to take in birthing If Gathering, and not for one day since I had jumped off and done what God wanted me to do had I felt confident or secure in this giant, risky leap that God had for me. I believe that Jesus calls us out on the water to risk because He knows on the other side of God-honoring, obedient risk is more of Him. We get more of God when we need Him, and risk forces us to need Him. See, the rhythm of the world is safety, but the rhythm of grace is risk. Because when we build and move for the glory of God, we have nothing to prove and nothing to fear. In John 9, Jesus goes out of His way to heal the blind man. And He doesn't just heal him on the spot. He actually tells him to walk down to the water and wash the mud out of his eyes. See, He asked the blind man to risk hope, and to have enough faith to do exactly what Jesus has asked of him. I know some of you have lost hope, and the risk of being disappointed again has shut you down. And to hope again feels impossible. And maybe that is the risk that God wants you to make today, is to trust him again. See, healing a blind man, it was an incredible miracle, but it had one seemingly massive flaw. He chooses to heal him on the Sabbath, which was considered work and was completely forbidden in Jewish law. And yet Jesus chooses to risk. Jesus chooses risk for the healing of people. See, he risked everything and busted through man-made religion and rules to heal a man that everyone saw as a burden. Jesus' life, it doesn't only give us sight, but it also shows us what we are to do once we have sight. This is a story of belief. Sight to this blind man is this picture of salvation and life from death. Hebrews says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. So those of you who know Jesus, you can see, you have been healed. And the question for us is, what will we do with our sight? For so long, I was so worried about my motives being bad, and I wouldn't use my gifts, and I worried about appearing prideful, and I just sat in the back of the room, and I did all of this in the name of humility. See, humility doesn't birth passivity. Pride births passivity. I wasn't humble, I was full of pride, as if my gifts and burdens and dreams had anything to do with me. It was always God accomplishing his purposes to save his people. I was supposed to get out of the way by doing what he asked me to do. Our risk should always be motivated by our compassion. The value we put on our sight will actually determine the price that we're willing to pay so that others can see. Look at verse 34. The healed man goes back to testify for Jesus. And he angers all the religious leaders. And he's banned from the synagogue. He actually gets kicked out of his religion for standing up for Jesus. And then I love this verse in 35. Jesus hears that they had kicked him out, and he goes and finds him. And he says, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And the healed man says, "Who is he? Tell me so that I may believe in him." And Jesus says, "You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." Then the man says, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. And Jesus says, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." Jesus is laying out these two different types of people. Those who are willing to risk everything to see, and people who think they already see, but they're actually blind. Let me describe these two types of people, because this was really convicting to me. The people who think they can see, they believe that they are capable. They believe that they're adequate. They believe they're in control. They don't have needs. They think that God has made them special and better than other people, and they know all the answers. The people who Jesus is going to heal that will see, they see what is true. They know they're weak. They know they're inadequate. They believe in God's power. They see the need around them, and they see God's ability to meet all need. See, See, Jesus risks so that people are healed. And so should we. In the months that would come, since Tasha and I laid out all that paper on my floor, our country would go from a few difficult news stories of racial tensions to dozens and dozens. Tasha was so moved by God and so moved by compassion for the brokenness that she saw, she launched a ministry of reconciliation called Be the Bridge. Because of her work, now thousands of racial reconciliation circles exist all over the world, and conversations are being had and they're being birthed through local churches all over. Guess what? None of us feel confident. All of us feel like we are way too far out on the ocean, walking on water, just like Peter, and we're full of doubt, half sinking and half in awe of this incredible God that we get to serve. I want to be among those who really see. I don't want to live blind to who God is and what he's doing here. So how do we do that? We risk. We risk our comfort, whatever it is. We step out in compassion towards the need that we see around us. And then we watch God start to move beyond our categories, beyond anything we could have imagined.